United Nations is warning that it is in a race to bankruptcy. Secretary General Antonio Guterres says the organization faces a deep financial crisis due to shrinking resources, delayed membership payments and growing global needs. Now, he's unveiled a sharply reduced $3.72 billion budget for 2026. That's a 15% cut on his original spending plan. The budget cut of over $500 million could see more than 2,500 jobs axed across the UN worldwide. That is close to 20% of the entire workforce. And there's a warning that late payments from member states could roll into the next year as well and leave the United Nations 20% short of its budget in 2027.
We'll again spend less than the budget in 2026 because we did not collect enough. And that will probably lead to a collapse of the regular functioning of our organization. And then potentially face the prospect of returning up to $600 million in 2027, or about 20% of the budget. That means a race to bankruptcy.
Maiara Folly is the executive director and co-founder of Plataforma CIPÓ, a Brazil-based think tank that focuses on climate governance and international relations. Thanks so much for joining us. Really, how close is the UN to bankruptcy?
Well, Sally, as you put it well, the UN is facing one of its deepest, if not its deepest, budget crisis. And the consequences for that are catastrophic in terms of job losses, as you said, but also in terms of people on the ground, right? People tend to think of the UN as New York, Geneva, where its main headquarters are, but the UN is present in over 150 countries. It's involved in dealing with conflicts, humanitarian emergencies, health crises, and those places is where people will be affected the most by its severe budget cuts that the Secretary General has announced.
So those cuts are going to hurt, but who is to blame for this financial crisis in the UN?
Well, the US is without a doubt the main source of concern because the US has been traditionally the largest contributor to the UN regular budget. So the Trump administration's hostility towards the UN, it's bad news not only in terms of politics, but also in terms of finances. And yeah, I'd credit the main cause of this problem to the United States.
I mean, the US, I think, their payment is about 22% of the entire budget. But the US payment problems and delays to the UN, they're nothing new. So I'm wondering if this has an extra element, not just about money, but perhaps about influence or change of direction from the US side.
For sure. The UN has, faced financial challenges over the course of the years. This is not a new problem, but I think it's important for us to have in mind that the UN operates into a broader ecosystem. It operates alongside NGOs, other humanitarian agencies. And what we've seen in recent years, not only in the US, but also in other major economies in Europe, for instance, is a sharp decline in foreign aid, which has direct and indirect impact for the United Nations. So the political signals are concerning.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned the humanitarian concerns, but also we know that the UN has a peacekeeping force, and we have a number of ceasefires, notably the one in Gaza at the moment, looking pretty fragile. But could these budget cuts really impact the peacekeeping efforts of the UN?
Yes, certainly. When we're talking about 15% cuts, so as much as the UN Secretary General is trying to increase efficiency and optimize resources, the organization will not remain intact, and a large part of his work relate to peace operations. The UN is on the ground trying to bring out peace and stabilization to many countries. So certainly we will see an impact in those conflict-affected regions.
Could you see any way through this financial crisis? Is there a solution here?
Ultimately, Sally, I'd say that everything comes to politics, right? It is about prioritization. We saw last year a record record investments in military spending. We are talking about $2.7 trillion US, which were allocated to that. Putting things into perspective, for every dollar the countries give to the UN, they spend 750 on weapons. So it's not necessarily a matter of resources, but of political prioritization of where the money is going to be put.
Good point. Thank you so much, Maiara Folly, Executive Director of Plataforma CIPÓ, which is a Brazil-based think tank.